Good morning, everyone. I'm John Doberstein, Senior Editor at No-Till Farmer. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar entitled Cutting Through Complexity, Effective Solutions for Herbicide Resistance Management with HELM Crop Solutions. With that, let's turn the show over to our speaker today. Tim Ford, HELM Crop Solutions Crop Consultant Liaison, is a certified agronomist with 40-plus years of experience in the industry. Today, Tim's going to unpack the underlying causes that make resistance such a persistent issue and help you get a clear understanding of the science behind resistance trends, as well as learning how to strengthen your management approach before burn down and beyond. So without any more delay, let's turn it over to Tim.
Good morning. Just a brief introduction. My name's Tim Ford. As he mentioned, I live in the state of Louisiana. I have, in my career, traveled pretty much across the whole United States and been involved with everything from soil fumigation through fertilization, crop protection, and beyond. I've had the privilege of seeing every state in the United States and most of the crops that are grown in those states. So I've been around agriculture my entire life. I came from the consulting industry. My first job was with a crop consultant, walking cotton fields, which is really good on your knees. 38-inch rows at 5'7.5". So some of you folks out there probably will understand and appreciate that. So the title of this presentation is Cutting Through Complexity, trying to manage effective solutions for your herbicide programs in a world of resistance management. So just a brief outline talking about this. If managing resistance were easy, we still wouldn't be having a conversation about it for sure. We all know that 30 years ago, 25 years ago, when Roundup Ready crops and GMO came out, it made it the easy button for growers. And so now we're back to that hard button where we've got to manage the different things in the field and understand what it is that we're putting out. So just looking at the agenda, we'll talk about resistance and some of the trends around the resistance and the challenges. Then, of course, what the marketing maze might have to do to impact your decision-making process, what the retailers and advisors' roles are in the process, and then potentially some strategies to consider looking ahead, and then the power of intentional action. We'll leave a few minutes at the end of this presentation for questions, and hopefully I can answer them. So herbicide resistance is continuing to trend upward globally. I don't think we'll see a change in that anytime in the near future. There are over more than 534 cases. That covers 273 weedy species, 168 herbicides, and 21 modes of action. Kind of spells out the complexity of what we're dealing with. Just in the United States, we have over 130 documented cases of resistance, and we're getting new ones every year. We had new ones added in the state of Louisiana in the last 18 months. So we've been disengaged in our herbicide knowledge. And what does that mean? That just means that when you have the easy button where you're spraying one or two products across the field and trying to manage these weeds, we're not practicing or paying attention to the different modes of action that we have available to us in trying to manage resistance. And it's confusing. It's extremely confusing because if you look, this is a chart that's available publicly on the internet, the herbicide classifications. You can see it's quite complex. So the Roundup Ready era simplified the management and narrowed the experience. And so what then has happened since then is the market has been flooded with off-patent products, same chemistries, different names, and in many cases, different variants of formulations. So it gets quite confusing trying to figure out just what's in the jug and trying to make sure you're putting multiple modes of action out onto your fields. So it's led to a lot of confusion. It's very difficult to keep up with. And so that leads us into, kind of what is new then on the resistance front. What can we talk about that we haven't talked about before? Are there new molecules? Are there new products? Mixing and matching, trying to make sure that you're not putting 2 or 3 PPOs out, for instance, that might cause you harm at planting, and so on and so forth. So Reviton kind of fits into that category in that it's a newer PPO product. It's a group 14 pyrimidine family. So basically what it does, or how it does it, which is the mode of action, it shuts down the chlorophyll production and photosynthesis. So that's what kills the plant. That's what kills the leaves and kills the plant. The next part of that is that we've run over 1,400 trials in North America since we've had this product. And it's demonstrated, very good performance for burn down and some other things that we're using it for the future. But for burn down, it's a very effective tool as a tank mix partner. So when we're thinking about the different weeds that we have at burn down, a lot of times if we're going, kind of old school with just say a glyphosate and a metolachlor glyphosate and 2,4-D, for instance, we might be missing some of the weed spectrums that are out there. So you've got to be strategic in what you're putting out ahead of planting. So let's talk about the same name, same chemistry, just a little bit. Mode of action, multiple products, gives you a false sense of rotation. Sometimes you might be using the same mode of action 2 or 3 ways in a tank, and that's not conducive to managing your weed resistance. So the growers just have to be diligent and understand the labels and the chemistries and the ratios, the pounds per gallon, because they're also different. I know there, for instance, are 3 clethodims out there that I know of locally. They could be anywhere from 1 pound, 2 pound, or 3 pound, and I think there's even a new 4 pound out coming this year. So you have to make sure that you adjust your rates accordingly. The active ingredient percentages vary, which means your rates will vary. And if you don't change the rates, then your efficacy will suffer from that. So this is kind of a snapshot of that. It's probably just a little bit blurry, but this is a snapshot of kind of your herbicide classification chart. It's busy. And a lot of people don't necessarily either understand what the different modes of action are or really don't care. They just want dead weeds. So we got to make sure that we surround ourselves with people that do, and we've got to make sure that we're putting multiple modes of action in the tank, so that we're trying to get the best start for the season. So you can see over on the left, we've got the ACAs inhibitors, and then the ALSs, which rolls right into, your photosynthesis inhibitors, your growth regulators, your pigment inhibitors, like your chromosomes and whatnot, your cell membrane disruptors, which what the PPOs fall into that category, and so on and so forth. So it takes engagement at every level. One of the jobs that I do is I work with crop consultants across the United States to try to keep them informed and up to date on label changes and what's working across the belt, across the country, and different crops and different environments, and all those things matter when you're looking at putting these products out to control your weeds. So crop advisors and retailers, they go hand in hand. The retailers have to understand the labels just like the grower, and they're usually the first phone call that a grower makes is to their retailer. But in a lot of parts of the country, the crop advisors, whether they're a CCA or they're a licensed crop consultant, depending on the state that they're in, they're an important go-to resource for understanding what they can and can't do. No single company can supply a complete resistance program. That's kind of a broad brush statement, but it's true. I mean, for the most part, we have products that fit in a lot of different categories, and you just have to make sure that you're putting in everything that you need for that acre. So collaborate with your supplier, your advisor, just to make sure that you're getting what you need in the tank to avoid any disruptions with lack of control or developing more herbicide resistance, trying to prolong the resistance as long as possible. With that, the engagement would look like regularly looking at the fields. Right now, for instance, in the South, we're looking at the fields for Italian ryegrass emergence. This is the time of the year when we do our what we call fall burn down. So it's a little easier to control that weed at a small stage, a 1 to 2 leaf stage, for instance. And then it's also the time that a lot of the farmers are also applying a residual, whether it be a metribuzin plus a metolachlor or something like that, to ensure that they're going to get 45 to 60 days, hopefully, of residual, and then come back in the middle of January to do their spring burn down to catch the escapes, because nothing is perfect. Evaluate the application timing. Just as I mentioned with what we're doing here in the northern geographies, it's a little different. You're getting into a deep freeze, so pretty much everything is probably close to done. But in the southern part of the United States, we're evaluating what needs to go out, at what rate, and what nozzle type to use. And then, of course, the big one is the weed size, especially when we're dealing with things like water hemp and palmer. Those things can grow so rapidly that we have to really pay attention to those by looking at the fields. And then the localized knowledge, just everybody just paying attention to what's going on in your area, what your neighbor's doing or not doing, how that impacts you, what's coming across the line, and vice versa. 4 strategies for smarter resistance management would include, for instance, trace your herbicide history and your MOA before applying. You know, keep field maps, keep logs, keep notes, and understand, you know, what you're putting out and when it was put out. You know, we have some products in the South. We grow a lot of different crops in the South. We're not a monocrop area by any means, so you have to pay attention to, well, if I put out metolachlor, can I plant rice? Probably not. Probably need to put some other product out there for residual control of some of these weeds. You know, if you're going in with corn or cotton or soybeans, you know, then your metribuzin, metolachlor, paraquat mix has a good fit, and then Reviton would have a good fit in that as well for the fall burn down. So just understand what your plant backs are, and you do that by tracing your herbicide history. Once again, just understanding those product labels and the modes of action and how they fit. The second part of that would be the rates and AI percentages. As I mentioned before, even with a product just as simple as clethodim, we've got 3 or 4 formulations out there. And then, of course, you have combinations of MOAs in jugs where you might be putting out a PPO that's coupled with a pre-merge product, for instance. So just knowing what those concentrations are and making sure that the rates are going out at the appropriately recommended labeled rate, because what's in one jug from one company might not be the same concentration of that of another company or a distribution labeled product, for instance. A lot of times they're changed up. So just knowing what those concentration rates are. Doing the little things right. You know, the application details, the rate, the nozzle, the weather. The weather's important. The weather's important with a lot of these products that we put out, not necessarily the pre-merges so much, other than the fact that if we don't get a good settling rain on it, guess what? It's not going to distribute in that top inch of the soil where we need it to be. So rate, nozzle, speed, adjuvants, volume, coverage, all these impact control, and then weather is another big one. So watch Mother Nature and see what she's, you know, going to throw at us. We all have 5 or 6 weather apps on our phone. try to plan these things appropriately where we can get them watered into the soil surface. And then re-engage, collaborating with your neighbors, other growers, meetings, extension. We had an extension meeting here in North Louisiana yesterday, and we talked. It was a CCA meeting, so there were CEUs for the CCAs at this meeting, and basically we were just going over some of the fall burn down as well as looking ahead at soil nutrition management. Because of the economy right now, a lot of the growers are not putting out for fertility products, and so just being engaged and knowing what's going on around you, helps to prevent complacency on the farm. This is a pretty important statement, and this is the thing that gets a lot of people in trouble. Going in on the front end, the cheapest program can a lot of times be the costliest mistake, and we find that to be true, especially in Italian ryegrass. We find that to be true in water hemp and also in palmer and many other weeds. We have glyphosate-resistant Johnson grass in the South now, and it's getting very difficult to control because of the rhizomes. We don't have a lot of options for that. So the cheapest program can be the costliest mistake. Rescue treatments typically can cost 2 times or even more than that than it would have been to do it the right way initially with a little bit more investment on the front end. And then there's no guarantee that those treatments will even be successful. There are factors to take into consideration there. For instance, weed size. Weed size matters. So you take a $20 effective plan on the front end, could be a $40 to $50 rescue cost, and now you've got $60 to $70 per acre involved, and you're still trying to control the weed spectrum. So invest in prevention, not correction. They taught us in agronomy 101, the best way to control a weed is before it comes up. That's always been the way that it has been. And I think glyphosate got us into a trap and got us out of thinking about how to control these the way that they've taught us for years. And that's on the front end with prevention. So looking beyond chemistry and trying to merge and look at the collaboration, your cultural practices, your chemistry, and then your field awareness, your field history, the things that are out there that you know about. It goes back to keeping those good notes. A lot of us have RTK, so we have yield mapping, putting all that information together into field by field breakdown so that we remember, oh yeah, I had a pretty good breakout in the middle of that field last year, a palmer. I need to be watching for it, and I need to catch that at that weed height size so that I can knock it out because last year it got away from me. Those are the things that we've got to keep in mind moving forward. So occasional tillage, layering the residuals, looking at the different modes of action, because there are different modes of action on your residuals, what works best for that crop. And then, of course, the bare soil applications. We remember the old days of trying to incorporate the trifluralins. We've got to pay attention to whether or not these products are sensitive to dry weather, sensitive to UV. Do they need to be lightly tilled in? Do they need to be water in? And then harmonizing your soil health goals with your weed controls. That's where your no-till or reduced tillage comes into play, and it's certainly where products like Reviton fit in because you're trying not to disturb that tilth that you're trying to build up. And then field by field flexibility matters. What you do on one side of the farm may not be the same, may not be able to do the same thing on another side of the farm for reasons like weed resistance or irrigation management or whatever. But there are a lot of factors to take into consideration. So then managing resistance means to invest in the right program up front. Engagement equals control. And you're still not going to win every time, but the more that you do it right, the easier the challenge seems to be. So staying informed on the MOAs in the rates, understanding where they fit, how they fit, what goes together, what mixes well, what can you stack, what can't you stack. Walk in the fields, don't rely on a clean field illusion, going to the hunting camp and hunting for 45 days and forgetting about it. You still got to look at that field and see what's out there, either the grower or the crop consultant or the crop advisor or the retailer. Somebody's got to be paying attention to what's happening out there. And then trying to maintain being proactive versus reactive. Reactive means you're always trying to catch up. Proactive means a lot of times you have to make fewer decisions for applications on that field if you get it right on the front end. And then collaborations, just trying to collaborate with, like I said, the groups, the extension, your retailer, your crop consultant, and just trying to stay ahead by working together. So just some key takeaways for what we're talking about today is to try to simplify it. A lot of times we can put 3 MOAs out in the fall, and that keeps us from having to put another 3 MOAs or 4 MOAs out as a rescue or a spring treatment. And the same thing goes in the spring. Looking at plant backs, you've got to deal with, if I put this product out, how long is it going to take to kill? When do I want to plant? So some of these auxins, they have a 30 to 45 day time frame to be able to control that weed. Do you have 45 to 60 days to wait to plant that crop? You take these things into consideration. So if you understand on the front end, it just helps to simplify that conversation. Being proactive, early layered, typically saves money. There are exceptions to every rule, but this is the best way to manage weed resistance is by being proactive. Engage fully, and that just means from the farm gate to the formulation, understanding all the different components in that process, and it requires everybody. And then finally, just keep learning. We learn something new every day, and resistance management is going to continue to get more difficult as these weeds continue to get resistance to these different modes of action. The way that we ensure that success for a longer period of time is by mixing them up, using multiple modes of action, switching them up. Don't do the same thing every time. Try to keep alternating, and a lot of that also has to do with crop rotation. So we have a lot of folks that in the South, for instance, that have looked at crop rotation from soybeans and cotton to corn to try to more effectively manage their palmer. And the same thing with water hemp as you go up through the Midwest and into the Dakotas. Just looking at crop rotation as well as mixing up your modes of action. Just a quick note about HELM and who we are, HELM Crop Solutions. We're a privately owned company. We're based out of Germany. Our offices in the United States are in Tampa and Kansas City. Tampa is our crop protection, and Kansas City is our fertilizer division. We tend to partner with. We have strong partnerships. We have representation across the United States. And we have distribution partners, and then we also have good engagement at the grower level. Certainly, we don't get to see all the growers because we're not, in every county or parish, but we do try to have that engagement at all levels of the chain, from the top to the bottom. We offer a pretty wide portfolio of some post-patent, but also some innovative and proprietary products to help with the programs that we've talked about today. And we supply that to the supply chain. We also have crop nutrition and plant advantage products, which are about the biologic products, and they have a really good utility in nitrogen use efficiency, and as well as some crop defense functions. So we try to be more complete in our scope in looking at the acre from start to finish. We have ports up and down the Mississippi River for our fertilizer division, and we supply fertilizer to all of the major distribution companies. And so with that, I'm going to let John or somebody, there's my information if you'd like to email or get a hold of HELM. We're on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn with HELM Crop Solutions.
Great. Well, thank you, Tim, for that presentation. It was very informative. I know weed control is on the minds of lots of folks, and I think that's some, good practical information to share. So if you've got questions for Tim, please go ahead and go to the Q&A module on the bottom of your screen and send some questions. Don't be shy. One question I see that did pop up here is, are there specific soil or tillage systems where Reviton works best?
So Reviton works really well in most situations. It's not, whether it be no-till or conventional. I think that the thing that I try to pay attention to is coverage. So we want to make sure that we're using the right gallons per acre, and then of course the right nozzle type. So sometimes we get caught in the trap of using these large droplet nozzles and we're not getting the proper coverage. So paying attention to nozzle type, paying attention to gallons per acre. The more water you put, the better that the product will work. And that's just about the way it is in most of these chemistries that we use. A lot of times, though, we see folks using like an auxin nozzle because it doesn't take as much of an auxin to get onto the leaf to get into the plant, whereas a PPO coverage is key. And the adjuvant, the additive, we need MSO in that tank with Reviton to get the activity.
Right. Okay, good. Oh, another question here about planting. How long after applying this product can I plant corn or soybeans?
So for Reviton, it's pretty cool. It's got a real short plant back for most crops, and we've got a new label that just came out with some revisions that increased it on some new crops as well. So we had corn and soybeans at pretty much 0 days at below 2 ounces. So, once again, you kind of pay attention to the rate. If you're an ounce to an ounce and a half, then you're like 0 to 1 days on the plant backs on most of these crops. When you get over 2 ounces, then you might be at a 7-day plant back interval. But for most of the crops we're dealing with that are labeled, grain sorghum is a new one, peanuts is a new one. We're labeled for peanuts at 0 days now.
Okay, good. Other thing someone was curious about: weather or soil moisture. How does that affect the plant back timing with Reviton?
So cold weather can impact a lot of different products. It can impact Reviton's efficacy. It may slow it down a little bit. It doesn't seem to impact it as much as some products, but the cold weather can. The dry weather could also slow the degradation down a little bit. So if we're real dry in the spring, then we might, need to pay attention to waiting maybe 7 days, which is usually not a problem for most growers because they're burning down well ahead of planting. But yeah, they can impact Reviton. Usually it would be like dry weather or extremely cold weather.
Right. Burn down's always tank mixing is always an issue, and getting that all worked out on the farm. What herbicides can you tank mix with Reviton to improve a no-tiller or strip-tiller's burn down program?
So we tank mix quite well with most of the other herbicides that are on the market. It's a very low use product, and it's an SC formulation, so it does tend to mix very well. You put it in the order that's recommended on the label, but your auxins, 2,4-D, glyphosate, glufosinate, acetochlor or metolachlor. For instance, in the fall right now, I know there are a lot of applications going out with paraquat and with metribuzin and with metolachlor to try to control emerged ryegrass and henbit, and then getting a good residual layer applied to keep any more of the ryegrass from coming up. So, typically we haven't seen any tank mix issues whatsoever.
Right. Good. That's good to know. Are there any tank mix restrictions or compatibility issues with Revitime while we're on that topic of tank mixing?
I think the one that we avoid is with high pH, products or high ammonia products, which I'll recommend AMS at like a 1%, but if you get into a high ammonia product, then they tend to degrade the molecule just like they do with other. It's kind of a common tank cleaner, right? So that's probably the main thing to avoid. Other than that, we've got a pretty wide stance on tank mix options.
MSO and Revitime, what are the guidelines on that for people that use MSO?
So on the label, you can see that it gives you the option of using MSO or crop oil. My recommendation in the field is always that MSO gives you better control. So if you're going after a hard to control weed species, you don't want to hurt yourself right out of the gate. So let's use 1% of a high quality MSO. It's all about coverage. The PPOs need good coverage to do their job. And typically, I've seen a reduction in efficacy on some of the hard to control weeds just with the difference of using an MSO versus a low grade crop oil concentrate, for instance.
Related to that question, some people might think they can do a non-ionic surfactant or a crop oil concentrate for MSO. What's your opinion on that?
No. So if you do, you'll reduce your efficacy 35 to 55%. It just has to have that oil component in the tank. And it doesn't need to be an oil-like component. It doesn't need to be a similar to oil. There is a lot of misleading information on adjuvant jugs because they're not regulated the same way as the crop protection products. I would suggest using a CPDA certified adjuvant because they have run the gamut of what's required, what's in the jug, what's on the label match. And so we want to make sure that we're using a high quality MSO or high quality crop oil if they're not as hard to control weeds. In the fall, we do see a lot of farmers use the crop oil because they're trying to prevent seed bank, for instance. We harvest in the southern states, for instance. We'll harvest corn the 1st of August. We've got 3.5 months of growing season left after that. So that's an opportunity where sometimes they can use crop oil. But if they've got Palmer, then they use MSO. It's a hard to control weed species. So that's kind of the deciding factor for a lot of folks.
Okay.
But no NIS.
Yeah, just going back to rescue applications, what does a rescue application cost if your initial burn down fails?
Well, I mean, that's an open-ended question. It kind of depends on the crop. It kind of depends on the weed species. So let's say, for instance, let's just take an example of Italian ryegrass. That's a good example. If you miss it and it gets big and bushy, you can go out there. The best treatment that I've seen for trying to round up those escapes, and round up is probably not the right word, but to try to get a hold of those escapes is actually Revitine and Paraquat. They actually work quite well for those escapes. But once you get to that weed size, you're still not going to control all of them, and you might knock them down. And so now you've gone out there with another application that could be, somewhere in the range of $15, and you're still going to have a yield impact because the ryegrass is going to come back, and if it's going to be planted to corn, you're going to see a yield impairment. There's no question. So it's kind of an open-ended question in that not only do you have the cost of the pesticides or the herbicides that you've got to put out, which are now double or more, but now you've got a yield loss as well.
Okay. Tim, we got one other question that came in. How does Reviton compare to Sharpen?
So they're in the same class of chemistry. So Reviton is tiafenacil and Sharpen is saflofenacil. You'll see a clear difference, and we have data to support this in the speed of with which we kill the weeds and also the spectrum. So tiafenacil actually has grass activity and broadleaf activity, and most of the other PPOs have very little grass activity whatsoever. So just having that grass activity component in there broadens your horizons with regard to controlling these hard to control weeds and then other weeds. And we also tend to be better than other PPOs in some weeds like that are in the mustard family, or we also at burn down we'll have shepherd's purse, mustard, a lot of these different little weeds that hang out swine cress. If we get the product on the swine cress, we tend to do a good job on it, especially when you've tank mixed with glyphosate and 2,4-D. So it's kind of a good complete package, and your speed with which it kills the product is much faster than a saflofenacil product.
Great, great. Thank you for sharing that. That's excellent information. I think we have answered all the questions that have come across. And unless I see any other come across and I don't at the time, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up this webinar. Want to thank everyone for those great questions and thank you to Tim for the answers. As a reminder, today's presentation and audio will be made available on the No-Till Farmer website. You also receive an email within 48 hours of the recorded presentation, so watch your email for that. On behalf of HELM Crop Solutions, Tim Ford, and No-Till Farmer, thank you for joining us for today's presentation and enjoy the rest of your day.